All right, so once again, good afternoon, my dear students, and welcome back to our class. And today, what we're going to talk about is the prescriptive and the descriptive linguistics, no, as an approach or approaches in the study of language. So first off, no, please be ready with your pen and paper so you can actually write down some notes. No, while we're having our discussion. And anyway, since we're going to be doing this on a watch party, a live watch party, you can actually write down your comments or your questions down below. Just type in the comment, and then you can just write it there, and I can address that. All right. So moving on to the discussion. Let's start with the prescriptivism. So basically, just to give you a heads up, no, of the easiest definition of what is prescriptivism and what is descriptivism. It's actually as easy as this. When we say prescriptivism, it's how something should be done. That's according to the rule. It's what the rule actually are telling you what to do. And descriptivism, it's how you do it. So when we say prescriptivism, it is something that the right way or the right path. And when we say descriptivism, how you actually did it. Did you follow it or did you not follow it? Okay, so let's start with prescriptivism first. Prescription usually presupposes an authority whose judgment may be followed by other members of a speech community. So this is what I'm trying to say. So there's actually this sort of a leader or an authority who's saying that, okay, this word should be spoken this way, or this whole sentence should be spoken or should be actually used in this specific sentence this way. So it defines standardized language forms. So we can say that prescriptivism approach is actually the standardized language forms. The rules of grammar in the standard English used for specific purposes. So we have, I don't know guys if you are aware that we do have a lot of different subject-verb agreement and the STVDO and something like that, the grammar rules and everything, not to mention the syntax, the phonetics, the morphology, the phonemes, the morphemes and whatnot. So we do have a lot of rules when it comes to English. So if we are to talk about prescriptivism, that's actually the whole idea of prescriptivism are actually the rules in grammar, no, as in standard English. So the study of different styles and registers, persons, and situations. I believe you already talked about it. No, the styles, the persons, the situations, the registers, and whatnot. We already talked about it last week. So to use a certain style of language, for example, in legal language. So will the community be accepting new form, no, or make use of the newly evolved language as the standard language, or to prescribe it as the standard language? So that's how prescriptivism works. And to formulate these rules and codes in such a way for us to make them easily taught or learned. So for now, no, in our generation, we are actually governed by several rules and regulation when it comes to correct grammar use, the subject and verb agreement, the tenses of the verbs and everything. So we have that rules there, and it's actually a lot. No, there's over 100 rules. No, if you really look deeper, no, on the grammar rules. So prescription can refer both to the codification and the enforcement of rules governing how a language is to be used in a specific context. So when it's like I mentioned earlier, again, prescriptivism only revolves on what? How a specific language should be used in certain context or in specific situation, register, appropriateness in person. Okay, so that's how the actual language should be used. These rules can cover such topics as standards for spelling and grammar, syntax, or rules for what is deemed socially or politically correct. So it doesn't necessarily mean that if it's something that the government are using every day, it doesn't necessarily mean that the whole society would actually accept it as correct. No. So again, it really depends on the style, the register, the person, the situation, and its appropriateness. Okay, next. So when we talk about the prescriptive approach, we can actually apply it to most aspects of language. no, be it on spelling, grammar, semantics, or meaning or definition, pronunciation, and register, and person and role or context. So we can actually apply it, no, if we are to study the English language. We can use the prescriptive approach, how a certain word or how a certain language or how a certain sentence should actually be used in a certain occasion, for a group of people, for a certain time, for a style and register. Again, all right. So we have first the history of the prescriptivism. So whenever a society reaches a level of complexity to the point where it requires a permanent system of social stratification or hierarchy, the speech used by political and religious authorities is preserved and admired. Yes, because it makes them more prominent. It makes them the sense of intelligent or intelligence, no? Diba? If you sounded like a lawyer or sounded like a representative or congressman, or you sounded like somehow a pastor or a priest, it sometimes elevate your social hierarchy or your social status, no? Because a lot of people are now looking up to you. Okay, he's very intelligent and whatnot. Okay, so this speech often takes an archaic and honorific colors. So archaic, it gives you that sense of authority and sense of a level, no? And honorific colors. The style of language used in ritual also differs from everyday speech in many cultures, of course. Again, let me just keep on reminding you that every word is not actually applicable to any situation. Okay? Every word that we use is actually not applicable to every situation. Okay, so again, based on our previous discussion, word choice is actually one thing. Okay, so we have to be careful. Remember the cat woman and the cat lady? Okay, so we have to be very careful in choosing our words or the choices of words now that we're going to use. So we have the prescriptivism and writing. So this is actually where everything goes more on hardcore. Okay, because when it comes to speaking, it's I mean, a lot of people are not actually giving much attention when it comes to speaking, but more on writing, because we when we say writing, it immortalizes everything. So when you write something, we have the evidence, so we can read it, no? Unlike if we just saying it and there's no recording of it, so we cannot actually just say, you said that, you said an incorrect sentence, you have wrong grammar on the sentence that you mentioned earlier, so we cannot just contest that. So I had the prescriptivism in writing. So when writing is introduced into a new culture, new avenues for standards are open. Of course. Writing language lacks voice, tone, and inflection. Okay, so if you're just writing it, there's no tone, there's no intonation in the rising and the falling intonation, so you cannot actually feel that. And other vocal features that serve to disambiguate speech and tends to compensate for these by stricter adherence to linguistic norms. What do you mean exactly by that? When we say writing, there's no things like what I'm doing right now. All right, there's no actual movement, there's no actual intonation, there's no vocal changes, there's no tone, there's no rising and falling intonation and whatnot. You cannot see that if it's just in writing. Okay, because it sometimes, say for example, you submitted an essay to me, and the way the way you would like me to read this is somehow different to what I've done, so it's somehow come up, or it might give me a different connotation, no, of the things that you would wanted to tell me if it's just on reading, unlike if it's going to be on call or speech. Look into the example of texting and sending a message on Messenger and then doing an actual video call or calling them on their mobile phones. It's really hard. If you're texting, there's a limit, 160 characters and whatnot. Well, that's during my years, but for now I think it's unlimited. All right, so it's really hard. You gotta type it in. You gotta make sure that every spelling is correct, so there would be no errors and whatnot. And sometimes, because of the advance of technology, there's autocorrect, and sometimes it's not correct, just like what happened to me earlier. So you gotta be you have to be very careful if it's on writing, because a lot of people can actually see it. All right, and like if it's speaking. Sometimes you can actually just get with it by using a perfect pronunciation of every word. No, you can actually bypass that by just, sounding confident. No, actually, that's my technique. All right. Okay, so and since writers can take more time to think about their words, new avenues of standardization open up. Thus, literary language, the specific register of written language, lends itself to prescription to a higher degree than spoken language. Again, this is what I'm trying to say, because if it's written, a lot of people can see it, therefore, and if it's written, it takes a lot of time. And if you're given a lot of time, you're actually giving yourself or allowing yourself to think a lot of things as well. All right, and if you're thinking a lot of things, you gotta have to make sure that everything that you have written actually follows the standards of language. Does it follow the correct subject-verb agreement? Does it follow the semantics of it, every word on it, your word choices, everything? All right, you gotta have to consider everything when it's for writing, unlike when it's spoken. All right, so alphabets tend to follow religions. Wherever Western Christianity has spread, so has the Latin alphabet, while Eastern Orthodoxy is associated with Greek or Cyrillic alphabets, and Judaism with the Hebrew alphabet, and Islam and Hinduism, and go on and 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 on. All right, so in other words, religion has actually played the key role when it comes to spreading alphabets. So again, every literature, every country, or every culture, every religion actually follows their own standards of language, no? Just like what the Chinese and the Koreans and the Japanese have. Actually, they're actually a little bit similar, no? The Chinese and the Korean and the Japanese, if you would look into it, there are similar characters, because they're not using, or I mean, they're not actually doing the same things that we do, the A, B, C, D, and E's and whatnot. They're actually doing it some sort of a calligraphy. All right, it's their form of writing, so their alphabet is really different compared to us, and that is because of religion. It's spread all throughout the world because of religion, and that's fact. That's how actually the Philippines have been colonized by the Spaniards, because of religion. All right. So we have what we call standard or language standardization. Now, when we say language standardization, it's actually a result of many years of work by language scholars, philosophers, linguists, grammarians, and dictionary writers to arrive at a meaningful consensus on a workable guidelines for language users in describing what is correct, appropriate, and what is inappropriate use of language. So again, we have to be very thankful for them, because without their great efforts, we might not have our dictionaries, our lexicons, our thesaurus, no, that actually made our lives a little bit easier, or a little bit lighter, when it comes to English majors. And so we're gonna have to be very thankful for that. And because of them, all right, because of their works, no, because of their many years of works, with the language standardization actually came up. So standardized languages are useful for inter-regional communication. All right, speakers of divergent dialects may understand a standard language used in broadcasting more readily than they would understand one another's. So what do you mean exactly by this? Here in the Philippines, because of our geography, we're separated by oceans, no? We are islands. We're an archipelago, for God's sake. All right. So we are an archipelago. We do have a lot of islands, and we live, no, separately because of our geography. So therefore, we do have a lot of language or dialect variations. All right, our language actually varies. If we're living on the north, Luzon, they're different. We have the Ifugaos, the Igorots, and down south we have the Tibuli. They have their own form of language in order for them to communicate. But the beauty of having one national language is Filipino. It allows us to communicate, to the whole country, and that is what the national broadcasting networks are actually using. No, ABS, CBM, GMA, everything of every kind of broadcasting networks, they use Filipino as their medium, of communication. Why? Because that is the standardized language here in the Philippines, and all throughout the world, the standardized language is English. That is why we call or we refer English as our universal language. But here in the Philippines, in our case, our national language is Filipino, and I believe most of the Filipinos actually know how to speak Filipino. Filipino and Tagalog is different. All right. Tagalog is actually for the NCR, living in the NCR, and here or in Batangas area, in Cavite, that's Tagalog. But here if we're referring to our national language, what is the national language of the Philippines? We refer to it as Filipino. Okay? The prescriptive linguist will formulate and define change occurring in languages in most parts of the world. Writers or communicators who wish to use words clearly, powerfully, or effectively often use prescriptive rules, believing that these may make their communications more widely understood and ambiguous. In short, because of the standardization of language, we actually able to understand. We're able to communicate with others, all throughout the world. It happened to me when I studied in Taiwan. This is just a blessing that we Filipinos were given this what we call neutral tongue. All right, because we can easily and because of the colonization of the Americans, we were able to get this grasp, or we grasp their talent of speaking English, and then for God's sake, and as a matter of fact, we Filipinos are actually being dubbed as English as our second tongue, Kumbaga in Filipino, ayan na yung ating pangalawang dila na, yan at pangalawang lingwahe ang English. And we have to be very thankful for that. So a big round of applause, because of globalization and because of this pananakop things, and we get to experience this, and that is something that we have to be very thankful. That's what gives us an edge compared to other people and the rest of the world. Okay, we have this great command of English. Ayan. So prescriptive is actually, again, just a quick recap. Prescriptive is how a certain language or how a certain word should actually be used in a specific sentence. And descriptive now, this is what we're going to talk about. Descriptive is how a certain person use that specific language. So here it is. Descriptive linguistics, scholarly research in linguistics is descriptive. Like all other sciences, its aim is to observe linguistic world as it is, without a bias of preconceived ideas about how it ought to be. Modern descriptive linguistic is based on structural approach to language. Of course, it has to be based on the structural approach of the language because we're talking about prescriptive and the descriptive. Linguistics has always required a process called description, which involves observing language and creating conceptual categories for it without establishing rules of language. I'm just reading it first to you, and then I'm going to explain it back. Linguistics, as any other branch of science, requires observation and analysis of a natural phenomenon, such as the other words in communication, which may be done without prescriptive rules. In short, again, let me just clarify this. Descriptive approach, or the description approach in studying the language, is how a group of people or how a certain person or how a society actually uses the actual language. Because we cannot, even though there's a standardized language, no, being brought to us by prescriptive approach, a lot of people or some people are actually are not actually going to use it, all right, because they have their own dialect as well. Just like the gay lingos, you have the slangs, the street words, no? People are the people or the words, no? People are using in the streets. Wales, people living on the belong to a group of society or different cultures, so they have their own languages and dialects. So because again of the descriptive approach, no, or the prescriptive approach, we actually had this standardized language. And the descriptive approach, we cannot actually just deny the fact that, again, there's a lot of people who are actually using different language. So we also have to study them, why there is something like this happening in our society. So, what descriptive linguists study? Ano yung pinag-aralan nila? So, individuals and groups, linguistic characteristics by looking at the social-cultural layers that make up the individual or collective identities, contexts, or that of speech communities such as nationality, ethnicity, class, everything. In short, in general, it's the whole, no? They're actually studying language as a whole, starting from self-identity from inside the family, then education, social status or culture or class patterns, regional dialects and ethnicity, and then the nation or the whole country. That's actually it. So it's everything down from the basic component, from the house up to the whole country. In short, in Filipino, paano ba sila, ano ba yung naging kanyang influence, no? Kung bakit siya naging ganon at bakit hindi siya nakapag-develop ng ganyang klaseng lengguwahe. So, iti-trace back natin yan starting from the down, or starting from the beginning, from home or from the house, up until the much wider, which is the whole nation. Okay, next. So the descriptive approach, it includes the various ways a language is used by people across different regions, socioeconomic class, cultural, ethnic, and educational levels. So if you would notice, people who are actually graduate of a 4-year course and are now working in a professional field, their choices of words are actually different compared to those who were not able to go to school. Right? So people who are actually rich, their words and their languages are actually different to just the average people. Right? The mga social thingy, the socialites. Oh my gosh, it's like so hot, like super init. Diba? So I mean that's what actually descriptive approach is all about. It can also include declaration of what particular groups consider to be a good taste. If these tastes are conservative, prescription may be resistant to language change. So, pag medyo conservative, ay doon tayo sa prescription, to the prescribed or the standardized language. If they're radical, prescription may be productive of neologism, creating new words, and fashionability. So this is what's happening on a certain group of people who are actually on the higher hierarchy or the higher social status, no? Their cultural background, they're able to raise in a different culture. Their ethnicity, maybe they were actually raised into an ethnic group, let's say the Ati or whatever ethnic group that is. So things like this, no? It would really affect their usage of a language. Prescription can also include recommendation for effective language usage. Why? Because again, if you prescribe something or if you laid out a rule that this is the one, this is the only language that you're going to use, no? All throughout the country, all throughout the whole nation. So it would be a lot easier for the whole people or for the whole society to communicate if we just have one common language. Okay, that's actually the beauty of prescription or prescriptive approach. Unlike the descriptive approach, it's pretty much a little bit confusing and a little bit harder because, admit it, here in our world, in this generation, we do have a lot of differences. All right. So, prescription typically differs from the descriptive approach, which involves observation and recording of how language used in everyday life, which is the basis of a linguistic research. Of course, you're gonna have to do some experiment, no, observations of how people are actually using the language, for you to be able to discuss it and to understand it and to study it. So serious descriptive work is usually based on written text or corpus analysis or in field studies. An example, the speech behavioral patterns, but the term description includes each individual's observation of their own language usage. Now, what do you mean exactly by that? So when we talk about serious descriptive work, it has to be an in-depth analysis, on the written literatures, how people are actually using that specific language, and how does description approach or how description principle apply to that specific society. Unlike prescription, descriptive linguistics makes no value judgment and makes no recommendation. Why? Because again, descriptive, it depends on how you are going to use your own language. In Filipino, kung gusto mo maging arte-artihan, maging social-socialan, bahala ka sa choices of words mo. Alright? But, again, parang if we would make this one simpler, meron tayong tinatawag, we have this what we call formal and informal language. Formal is yan yung the one that we're using professionally, and the informal is the one that we're using every day in our house. Yan yung informal. So parang lang siyang prescriptive and descriptive. The prescriptive is the formal, the descriptive is the informal. So a description of the phonology of a language in a question. So you can actually use this approach to better understand language. Okay, so a linguistic description is considered descriptively adequate if it achieves one or more of the following goals of descriptive linguistics. So maybe you can try doing this. So a description of the phonology of the language in a question. So if you could actually give us the phonology or how a certain word it should actually be pronounced, you come up with that kind of study. Yes, maybe you could actually you are actually doing the descriptive approach, descriptive linguistics, or you can also give a description of the morphology of words belonging to that language. How are actually being words are actually being formed. A description of the syntax of well-formed sentences of that language. When I say syntax, the meaning, the description of lexical derivation. So how these actually how words are actually being used properly in the sentence. A documentation of the vocabulary, including at least 1,000 entries. So you have this some kind of a thesaurus and whatnot. You're able to give this different synonyms, and antonyms and things like that. Or a reproduction of a few genuine texts, or you were able to create your own text, or a lexicology, collection of writings or words, so you were able to make your own dictionary or something like that. Yes, you're doing the descriptive linguistic. And internalization of grammatical content. An example, something called linguistic competence, which give them the ability to extrapolate correctly from their experience new but correct expression and to reject unacceptable expression. Never mind about it. What we're trying to come up here is that if you guys could actually give us these different descriptions, or this different works, it just goes to show that you can be a descriptive linguist. Ayan. So in general, all language in developed societies therefore tends to exist in a continuum of styles. So it doesn't only happen in developed societies, but also here in the Philippines. The styles on how we say or how we use our Filipino language, it actually evolved. Marami na nga, may Taglish na nga eh. Maybe as years pass, maybe another variation of Filipino would actually arise, like Konoy, Koreanoy, Koreanoy, or Creolish or anything? Who knows? All right. Privileged language is used in legal, ceremonial, and religious contexts and tends to be prized over local and private speech. So we already know that. Now when we say privilege, that's the formal words or formal language. Written styles necessarily differ from spoken language. Again, we already discussed it. So this is just a quick recap. Given the different strategies used to communicate in writing as opposed to speech, where the discontinuity between a high and a low style of language becomes marked, a state of diglossia arises here. The privileged language requires special study to master and is not instantly intelligible to the untrained. What do you mean exactly by that? If we discontinue or if we stop using the standardized language, of course, if you stop using it, no one's gonna use it. So therefore, it would gonna be hard for the next generation to understand and to use it or to know how to properly use that standard language that you guys stopped using. Okay. So problems with prescriptivism. One of the most serious of these is that prescription has a tendency to favor the language of one particular region or social class over others. So that's, I think, what happened to Filipino and English as well. No, Filipino and here in the Philippines in our case, but in general in the whole world, I think that's what happened to English because of their because of the United States level or society level, no, their hierarchy. They're actually on the top of the list when it comes to countries. They're actually the most powerful country, quote unquote, no, so they say. So therefore, a lot of people are actually using English in the whole world, and they I believe they standardized that English should be our universal language. So again, one of the most serious of these is that prescription has a tendency to favor the language of one particular region or social class over others, and thus militates against linguistic diversity. A second problem with prescription is that prescriptive rules quickly become entrenched and it is difficult to change them when the language changes. So what do you mean exactly by that? If we have a prescriptive language, it would be difficult for us to change it, of course, because that's the thing, or that's the specific language that we're born with, that we are being actually taught that we taught to use and we're told to use, no, all throughout our life. So it's going to be hard for us to change it. Thus, there is a tendency for prescription to be overly conservative. So in short, it's not actually something that is fixed, no, or absolute. When in the early 19th century, the avoidance of split infinitives, today it has become common in most varieties of English, and a prohibition is no longer sensible in this way, prescription can appear to be antithetical to natural language evolution, the intention of those formulating the rules. What do you mean exactly by that? Because if you prescribe something, it gives us this kind of presumption, no, that you're not allowing the whole society or the whole nation or the whole country or the whole world to formulate their own form of language, regardless of whatever social structure there is or they're having or they have. So that's actually one of the downfall of the prescriptivism. Same thing goes with when you guys are being governed by laws. If you're told by your parents not to go out at this time, so therefore you cannot do anything about it because that's what that's actually what they prescribe you to do or told you to do every day. Unlike description, you can do anything. You can do your own variation or your own style when it comes to your own language. Another problem of prescriptivism is that bureaucracy is another factor that encourages prescriptive tendencies in language. Again, this is what I'm trying to say, like what happened in the US, because they're actually known to us or known to many as the most powerful country in the world. And so it encourages the prescriptive tendencies in language. Even though even they don't have the most number of people in the whole world, no, that's China. But still, the universal language is English. So when government centers arise, people acquire different forms of language which they use in dealing with government, which may be seated far from the locality of the governed. So again, it really depends. Standard writs and other legal forms create a body of precedent in language that tends to be reused over the generations and centuries. In more recent times, the effects of bureaucracy have been accelerated by the popularization of travel and telecommunications. People grow accustomed to hearing speech from distant areas. That is because as well of modernization and globalization and the evolution of technology, we are able to understand other cultures as well. Eventually, these several factors encourage standards to arise because of diversity. Because nowadays there's a lot of new groups of people, no, groups of society or different societies, different cultures are now arising, and having their own unique and their own form of language. The need for a standardization or standardized language is important for us to be able to understand each other. Finally, there is the problem of inappropriate dogmatism. When I say dogmatism, it's something that has been there, or you think of something, no? Ayan yun, which linguists oppose. Kasi kapag sinabi na, in Filipino kapag sinabi natin, kapag ito ginamit mo na salita, if this is the type of language that you're going to use, you're social. No, the misconception, that's what dogmatism is. No, their own dogma. No? If you're a Filipino, or if you're here in Santa Fe in general, or to be specific, here in Santa Fe, if you're using English every day, a lot of people actually say, social, wow, hadak, pabida-bida, hadak idma. I mean, these are just stereotypes, no, and old version of dogma. But again, that is why I'm encouraging every one of you to speak in English, because it's not something that we are born with, no. It has to be enhanced, no? We need to practice it. And whether you like it or not, you need actually to learn how to speak English, especially you BS Ed students, major in English. All right? And not only for us teachers, or for you in your case, future teachers, you're gonna need as well to know how to speak English, or basic English, no? Why? Because if you're applying for a job interviews are actually being done in English. So if you don't know how to speak basic English, so congratulations and good luck to all of you. And so we have the similarity and the differences, no, and the problems as well. So we have the differences in approach of prescription and description. Prescription and description are often seen as opposites in the sense that one declares how language should be used, while the other declares how language is. But they can also be complementary and usually exist in dynamic tension. And here in the Philippines, in our own setting, yes, they are actually in dynamic harmony. Ayan. So many commentators on language show elements of both prescription and description in their thinking, and popular debate on language issues frequently revolves around the question of how to balance this. So let's just leave it at to the linguists themselves, no? We're not going to be dealing with that much deeper, but it's just for sake of discussion, no? The differences in the approach, yes, they exist, no, at the same time. And so given any particular language controversy, prescription and description represent quite different, though not necessarily incompatible approaches to think about it. For example, a descriptive linguist working in English would describe the word ain't in terms of usage, distribution, and history, observing both its popularity but also the resistance to it in some parts of the language community, and so on and so forth and so forth. And it's there, all right, it's there. So ain't is actually a contraction of word, okay? Ain't, gonna, wanna, could've, wouldn't ya. So these are the examples. These words are not actually being used in formal language, all right? If you're using or writing a formal letter, you're not supposed to be using that, no? But in everyday life or everyday usage, the language, or you can actually use that, ain't, gonna, wanna, holda, what ya, something like that, all right? So in descriptive linguistic, non-standard varieties of language are held to be more or less correct than standard varieties of language. Yes, because a lot of people nowadays are using, no, the descriptive style or the dialect as compared to the standardized language, no? Every day. Not no, here in Santa Fe, I don't know if what percentage of Philippines or Santa Feños are actually using Tagalog or Filipino, no, as their everyday language in their house. Congratulations if you are using Filipino as your daily communicative language. Ayan, wow. Much more English. Ayan, congratulations. Whether observational methods are seen to be more objective than prescriptive methods, the outcomes of using prescriptive methods are also subject to description. Again, description pa din. A pure descriptivist would believe that no language can form or language form can ever be incorrect, and that advice on language usage is always misplaced. And some prescriptive institutions adjust their decrees according to the native speakers. Descriptions may testify to the acceptability of the form. So pwede siya mag-test na, no, you cannot actually use that. So what else? Prescriptivism, descriptivism for beginners. We're down to our last slide. The grammar glossary might define prescriptivism as a standard language, also standard dialect, standardized dialect, or standardized language. No, use a particular variety of language that has been given either legal or quasi-legal status, as it is actually a form promoted in schools and in media. It is usually considered by speakers of the language to be more correct in some sense and other dialects. It doesn't necessarily mean that since Filipino is our national language, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's all of it that are correct. No, because some dialects as well are referred to as correct dialect or correct language. No, the descriptive, on the other hand, is the kind of language patterns used by different people in different speech communities. An example, the language differences in different regions of the country, such as dialect, class, or educational levels. So again, you're gonna have to remember always that language varies depending on how they're being actually brought up as they grow old, depending on the society that they belong to, the ethnic group, the ethnicity, their level of education, their social status, their social hierarchy, and all of these stuffs. These are actually interrelated when it comes to their language choice. Ayan. Communication and linguistic varieties of language used by different groups of individuals in different settings. Again, if it's a formal communication or a formal conversation, therefore choices of words really matters. As ways different peoples use English to communicate different, or language to communicate different concepts that are significant to them only. How much more if you are talking to a professional, no? Let's say an astronaut talking to you about how sky or how actually the universe works and using these astronomical jargons. I don't know if you guys would be able to understand them. So there are appropriate languages for certain or for specific setting, people, time, register, and style. All right, you gotta have to remember that. But just to sum it all up, prescriptivism is how a language should be used, and descriptivism is how language was used. Comprende? Understood? If you have any questions, don't forget to just write it down here. There you go, so we can address it. And again, just a quick reminder for your activities, for your outputs, and forget to submit it on or before Friday. And just to let you know, we're going to have our midterms examination this coming Friday, Thursday and Friday as well. So that will be October the 1st and October the 2nd. So guys, please be ready about it. I'm going to be posting as well another video for the second topic, but there will be no live about it, about that specific topic about multilingualism. But I believe I was able to send the PowerPoint presentation to you already. So you just have to do an advanced reading about it, and I'm going to post a video about that as well. All right. So if you don't have any questions, again, thank you all very much for joining me here this afternoon. Again, be safe, everyone. God bless, and have a good day. Bye.